happened when you kind of lost it and obviously you ran a little bit wide?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I generally felt like it was going okay. I had good pace compared to Charles ahead of me, and my tyres were still okay. The rear was getting a bit twitchy, and I got to turn 3 and had a snap, and I can recover.
What did the Ferrari chief discover inside the Hamilton car that left him in shock after the GP of the Netherlands? Why this little anomaly in SF25 could define Ferrari's success or failure in 2025? Let's uncover everything. Zandvoort, a treacherous circuit, full of parallel curves, unstable climate, and a layout that mercilessly punishes any error. In that scenario, Ferrari reached the GP of the Netherlands with the accumulated pressure after a seasonal start below expectations. For Hamilton, it was the perfect opportunity to show progress in its adaptation. For Frédéric Vasseur, it was a turning point, to confirm whether the technical work of winter was paying fruit or if, on the contrary, there was a deeper fissure in the heart of the SF25 project. The race was chaotic from the first measures. The intermittent rain complicated strategic reading and forced all teams to improvise. But in Ferrari, the sensation was even more disconcerting. From the installation return, engineers detected strange patterns in the behavior of the Hamilton car differential. At first glance, they were not evident, but the British reported again and again on the radio that the car reacted erratically in partial traction phases. Sudden grip losses, unbalanced inputs in slow curve, unpredictable responses of the rear axle under load. For many pilots, these symptoms can be the product of the lack of temperature in the tires or a poorly calibrated setup. But in this case, Vasseur did not want to suppose anything. He ordered a complete analysis of the electronic system of the SF25 as soon as the race ended. What they found was revealing. An intermittent failure in the calibration of electronic differential, probably induced by an error in the software mapping, which caused the car to deliver the power unsynchronized between the rear wheels. In conditions of low adhesion such as Zandvoort, this ruling not only compromised performance, but could lead to an accident. The finding was devastating for what it implied. It was not an isolated failure. It was a systemic defect, which could have been present from the pre-season without being detected due to the stability of conditions and previous evidence. Vasseur understood that it was not that Hamilton did not adapt. The car was simply not delivering the platform that a pilot of his style needs to perform. This not only explained its difficulties in the acceleration phase, but also why, even with new tires, its rhythm in long batches was inconsistent and its confidence to the limit faded in each closed curve. The decision was immediate. Ferrari provisionally withdrew the affected software and returned to a more conservative base configuration. In addition, an internal review of all validation procedures of electronic systems on the track was initiated. Vasseur did not hesitate to summon the full technical team in Maranello for an emergency debriefing. He knew that not only the competitiveness of the car was at stake, but the credibility of the Hamilton-Ferrari project. It was inadmissible that a world champion was running with a car destabilized by an electronic anomaly, and even more so that the team had not detected it before. Vasseur's gesture was more than a technician. It was political. By recognizing the ruling publicly, he protected Hamilton, assumed institutional responsibility, and launched a clear message. It is not about blaming the pilot, but to understand why Ferrari's machinery had failed to give him the right tools. That gesture generated a wave of respect inside the paddock. Not all team leaders are willing to expose the mistakes of their internal structure. For Hamilton, it was a silent relief. For the first time since he signed with Ferrari, he felt that the team not only saw it as an emblem, but as a real technical asset that had to be protected and optimized. His feedback had been taken seriously. Your track sensation validated by the data. And most importantly, tangible changes began in the car from their sensitivity. That, in Formula One, is pure gold. The Netherlands GP was not a victory for Ferrari. There were no podiums or celebrations. But it was the exact moment in which the technical and political structure of the Scuderia turned its axis around a single question. How do we now build the Ferrari that Lewis Hamilton needs to win? The discovery of the SF25 electronic differential failure marked a non-return point for Ferrari. It was no longer a matter of adaptation of the pilot or lack of mileage, but of a structural vulnerability in the car that directly affected the confidence of one of the most valuable assets of the grille. What happened after Zandvoort was an internal reconfiguration at all levels: technical, strategic, and above all, political. On the technical level, the Maranello team activated an emergency audit led by Enrico Galtieri, responsible for the area of motors and electronics. His team dismantled not only Hamilton's car, but also that of Leclerc, to check if the failure was reproducible or if it was linked to a specific configuration. They discovered that the root of the problem was not a simple hardware failure, but a combination of poorly calibrated inputs on the motor map in race high-load mode that, in humidity conditions and low adhesion, overloaded the differential vectorization system. This generated asymmetric torque peaks, especially sensitive in paths like Zandvoort where weight transfers are extreme. The solution was not immediate, because it involved partially rewriting the traction control algorithm and reassessing the correlations of the simulator with real track data. Ferrari was forced to temporarily freeze the planned aerodynamic development for Imola and prioritize electronic stability. That is, sacrifice aerodynamic load potential to guarantee a predictable behavior of the car. A painful decision in a season where the tenths of a second not only define races but narratives. But it was on the political level where the coup was quieter and deeper. Frédéric Vasseur understood that the incident had weakened Ferrari's internal narrative as a solid technical team. Throughout the 2024 season, he had worked intensely to rebuild that credibility with concrete results. Finish seconds in the World Cup, cut mistakes in boxes, optimize strategies. But this hidden, prolonged ruling and in one of the most important cars of the grille threatened to erode months of institutional progress. Vasseur did not hesitate. He summoned a high-level meeting with the Ferrari Technical Council, where 3 urgent measures were defined: create a subgroup dedicated exclusively to electronic validation in real track conditions, reinforce the simulation program with real-time test pilots during the race weekends, and for the first time since 2019, assign to each pilot a personalized engineering cell with technical autonomy to report directly to direction. In other words, partially decentralize car management and allow Hamilton to have a direct and binding voice in the key decisions of development. But the challenge continues. Ferrari must now balance a double narrative, continue to develop a competitive car for both pilots, while consolidating a technical structure capable of interpreting and executing Hamilton's demands. Will not be easy. There will be friction, there will be errors. But if the team manages to sustain this new work philosophy, we may be attending the birth of a different Ferrari. One more modern, more receptive, more dangerous. What is happening in Ferrari this year is not simply a technical evolution. It is an internal struggle between tradition and innovation. On the one hand, a historical structure with consolidated processes and a deeply rooted hierarchical culture. On the other, the disruptive presence of a pilot who not only brings 7 titles in his pocket, but a completely different way of understanding and working high-level motoring. Hamilton has not arrived in Maranello just to pilot. It has arrived to transform. And that inevitably generates resistance, tension, even conflict. But it can also be the key to success. Because when a Formula One team decides to really listen to a pilot such as Hamilton, what he gets in return is not just experience. Get a compass, a clear direction for development, a privileged sensitivity to detect what works and what does not, and a track leadership capacity that very few in history have had. The question is not whether Hamilton is able to take Ferrari to the title. That has already demonstrated it before with worse cars and more complex contexts. The real unknown is whether Ferrari, as a structure, is willing to evolve quickly enough to keep up. Can they knock their internal walls before it is too late? Will they go from being an isolated talent team to a cohesive technical and human symphony? And now it's your turn. Do you think this is the worst beginning after Ferrari's summer stop with Hamilton as a central axis? Or do you think that the structural ghosts of the team will end up sabotaging another historical opportunity? I want to read you in the comments.